Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me already, my name is Kristen, and today we are going to be doing my November reading wrap-up. In the month of November, I read 18 books, which for me is honestly not that impressive. In fact, I think it's my least amount of books read since April. Yeah, not so great for me. But at the very least, I can take comfort in the fact that I read 7,328 pages, which is not too shabby, since a lot of my reads were fantasy books, and we all know fantasy books tend to be a little bit on the chonky side. So I will take my points where I can get them. And I did kind of rupture my eardrum in the middle of the month, so that did slow things down just a tad. But let's get into what I read. This month was all about quality over quantity. I had some of my favorite reads of the whole entire year, and I can't wait to talk about them with you. The first video I did this month was all about fairy tales, because Fairy Loot and Illumicrate were both like feeling the fairy tales, I guess, and I'm totally there with them. And I will link my fairy tale video below if you want to see me dressed as Red Riding Hood reviewing some of these books. First off, we had The Forest Grimm by Catherine Purdy, and this is a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood. In this particular retelling, our Red Riding Hood is named Clara, and she lives in a super special village where they have this wonderful book, and when you come of age in this village, you get to make one wish in the book, so long as you don't break the rules. And when some stupid villager decides to use their wish to hurt someone, the Forest Grimm gets super pissed and is like, we're taking our book back. They take their book, they put it somewhere in their forest, and then one by one they start ensorceling villagers, and they go wandering into the forest, never to be seen again. Luckily, there's a prophecy that says if you take your one wish and make a selfless wish with it, you can save everyone. Clara finds the loophole. So off she goes in her red cape and her crush Axel and her friend Penny, and they go off on their adventure. I loved it. It was fantastic. The plot was great. The twist that all the characters were original and great. This was an absolute 4-star. I can't wait to read the sequel, even if there were things that were a little YA or maybe I didn't super love. Great read. I had a total blast with The Forest Grimm by Catherine Purdy. After that, I read After the Forest by Cal Woods, and this is a retelling of Hansel and Gretel, but 20 years set in the future. So now they're all grown up, they're adults, they're on their own, their stepmother and father have passed, and they are doing their best to survive in a world that has just come out of a war. So, amazing book, except for one scene. There is this entire chapter of horrible animal cruelty and violence. Chapter 25, which is like page 400 in this book. I couldn't give it a 5-star, even though everything else in it was a 5-star for me. I am very interested to see what the author does later, but I hope this is not something that we see a repeat of. It is a standalone. That's always nice in the fantasy world, but please be aware of that in there. After that, for that video, I read Charming, and this is by Lynn Wood. It is about Prince Charming and his sidekick, Roland, and they basically go through the kingdoms and find princesses or lovely rich maidens in need, do a little good deed for them, get engaged to them, and then the morning of their nuptials, they are suddenly nowhere to be found, and neither is about, roughly half the kingdom's treasury. Shame on Prince Charming. The book opens up with him waiting for Sleeping Beauty to awake. She thinks he's his true love. He is not. She is heartbroken when he sneaks away, and a little while later, she happens to meet 2 other maidens he did kind of the same thing to, Snow White and Rapunzel, and they all hatch a plot to get their revenge. This is basically John Tucker Must Die, but not in high school, in Once Upon a Time fairy tale world. I honestly found this a slog to get through. I'm so sorry to say it, but if you wanted to have your fairy tale characters speak very formally, fine, but you can't also have the writing be very formal, because then there's no humor, there's no levity, there's no sarcasm, there's no snark, there's nothing there to make me laugh. I wanted to laugh. I wanted this to be funny. I didn't. It wasn't. Everything was there to make it work, and then the writing was just a total mismatch, which is a shame because the writing was not bad, but the tone and the plot totally clashed. After that, I read Thief, Liar, Lady by D.L. Soria. I figured if I'm gonna have a con man, Prince Charming, let's go with a con Cinderella. And you know what? Cinderella did it better. I loved this book and the romance. The romance was so heartbreaking, self-sacrificial, wonderful in the end. Give this a try. I haven't heard anyone else talk about it, and I think it's such an underrated read. Next up, we 13 books? 13 books I read for the Goodreads Choice Awards. And this was such an interesting experiment for me. First of all, thank you anyone who recommended books for me. They all ended up being 5 stars. You guys are amazing. I love you all so much. So let's go through them. The first one was Yellowface by Rebecca F. Kwong or R.F. Kwong. This is about a girl, Juniper, who goes to college with a girl named Athena. They're both in the writing program. It's super like exclusive. I think it's literally at Harvard. I mean, of course it's exclusive. And unfortunately for her, Juniper just isn't quite as amazing, or maybe she might think she is, as this girl Athena. And Athena, they both out of college get published pretty much right away, but Athena blows up. Her stuff's amazing. Everybody's loving it. She's this best-selling author. She's doing fantastic. Everybody loves everything she writes, and Juniper kind of fizzles out. One night they go out for wine because they see each other every so often, and they end up going back to Athena's place to hang out. They're kind of actually having an amazing time, and they're having some snacks, and Athena chokes to death and dies. Juniper, meanwhile, notices that she has just written the end on a manuscript, and Athena is super old-fashioned and doesn't show anyone her work and only writes her stuff out in one copy at a time on an old-fashioned typewriter. What's Juniper to do but to just borrow that manuscript and just see what it's like, and then go finish that manuscript and hand it in as her own, because she did all the work to finish it. I mean, it was just a rough draft. It needed so much work. It's basically her own now anyway. It's at best a collaboration. And you know what? June Hayward is just not gonna work for this book on Chinese migrant workers who are going to the front lines during World War I. So they go with her middle name, Song, which, you know, came from her hippie mother, but really it's just kind of ambiguous when it comes to heritage, shall we say, and works a bit better for the book. So, you know, she gets published, the book does amazing, and then people are kind of like, but you're white. Things go from there, and I loved this book so much. There are so many critiques about the whitewashing and all of the issues like the tokenism and the lack of representation in the publishing world. I just cannot imagine handing this to a publisher and being like, hi, yeah, the publishing world in general, y'all suck, and here's my thinly veiled critique on all of it in book form, and it's amazing and snarky and sarcastic and witty, and the humor is dark, and yet you're rooting for June, who is a terrible person, and it doesn't even matter. The whole time you're like, don't do that, take that notebook, why are you leaving now, don't do that, don't talk to that person, do talk to that person, fix that. Of course you want a sensitivity reader, what are you doing, you idiot? Ah, I loved it. It almost reads like a thriller. Like, I was so nervous the entire time I read this book. I read this in literally like one sitting. It was great. I loved it. It was 5 stars. I will read anything this author puts out forever, especially anything that she writes about writing. I think that is her perfect niche, and I just pick it up. It was great. Loved it. I also read thriller. I did not have a 5-star thriller to rate, so I ended up reading, thanks to one of your suggestions, Homecoming by Kate Morton. This is a very interesting one. So this takes place in Australia. This takes place in a town, and it starts out in 1959 on Christmas Eve. This guy finds a wife and her 3 children dead, just lying there having a little picnic to celebrate, and there's a basket that is sitting there that unfortunately was found empty where a baby was supposed to be. So pretty tragic start to any story. This mystery has just gone unsolved. And then we fast forward to kind of present day, 2018, but close enough, I guess. So in 2018, we meet this journalist who's kind of looking for her next story. She's living in London at the time, but she gets a phone call about her grandmother who's just fallen down the attic stairs and is now in the hospital in like intensive care, and the doctor's like, hey, she's 89 years old. If you're gonna come, like, and you want to see her, you should come now. So on a plane, Jess gets, that's her name, and she heads over, and when she gets there, she's like, oh my god, my grandma. But what was she doing going to the attic? And when she goes up to the attic, she realizes that they have a connection to this crazy unsolved case, and she starts digging around and finds that there is a book written about it, and their family is connected to this unsolved murder. And what's a journalist to do but get involved and try and figure out if she can solve this crazy unsolved murder in Australia. This one was tricky. I will say, give it a chance, because it does take a little bit to get into. There are so many characters, and the author just loves to use surnames. It does get a little bit confusing, so give yourself a little bit of grace in the beginning. It is written in a very literary way. This is not fast moving. This is not a thriller. This is a mystery. It's that kind of like sink into it, slow, drink your cup of tea on a foggy day kind of book. If you're willing to get into that and you like that kind of read, this could be fantastic for you because I loved this book. I was trying to listen to another audiobook when I was in the shower, waiting to finish this. Couldn't pay attention more than 5 minutes. I was watching a show with my husband. I kept just like looking over at the book. Couldn't pay attention. This completely owned me while I was reading it. I loved it. 5 stars. Next up, I think that's the romance category, and for this, I was saving the 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston for next summer, especially because I didn't particularly feel like crying. I mean, look at this edition. It's like lemonade and lemon meringue and lemon everything, and that is apparently because our main character's name is Clementine, and she inherits this apartment from her aunt with whom she used to travel. She was like her favorite person in the world, and unfortunately when she passes, she gets the apartment, and she was always told this apartment was magical, and it turns out it really is. When you go into it, you can meet someone who is living 7 years apart from you, either in the past or in the present, as it turns out. And for her, when she goes to the apartment, she meets this guy who's a baker, and he is living 7 years in the past. She meets him, and he's in his 20s, whereas if she was to go out in present time, he's in his 30s, which means he goes into that apartment and he's in his 20s. If he was to go out at that time, she'd be in her 20s. So really, it's like a 14-year age gap, like if they were both. It's very confusing. I'm not explaining it well. Ashley Poston, of course, explains it brilliantly because this woman, every word she writes is perfect, every plot she writes is perfect, every character she writes is perfect, everything she writes is perfect for me. I'm trying to get through her backlist now. I've just finished like a 3-book series about people attending like conventions for different movies and comic books and things. They were adorable. She's only gotten so much better since then. She is my favorite romance writer right now. Everything she writes just hits exactly right. You know you're going to get emotional. You know these characters are going to have a love that feels bigger than the world, bigger than time in this particular case. And she is making you ask the question, just because you have a love that is perfect in one time, in one moment, and you're soulmates in that particular time, you know, time changes you. Are you always soulmates? Are soulmates eternal? Please give it a shot. I loved it. I think you might too. That was the, romantasy category, I think. So first up for that was Foxglove King, and I was putting this one off because I knew it was about death magic, and hi, there's a skull on the front cover, and I was like, oh no, this might be gory and terrifying. And indeed, we start off with a scene with this girl, Lore, who had been living like down underneath the world for a while, and when she finally comes up, she becomes a poison runner, and she's sort of a spy, and she's living with this guy who we know darn well she's not going to end up with because she's kind of spying on him. And then a poison run goes wrong, and during that, a horse has a really, 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 really bad day, and I was like, no, I'm going to hate this book, and especially when she like brings him back for a little while, and I was like, no, I'm going to hate this book. But when she does, Hannah Witten has the best descriptions of magic I have ever read in my life. I'll get more into that in a second, though. Let me finish the descriptions. Okay. So Lore gets caught having magic, and you can't have magic in this world. So she's given the choice, hi, you can come to the castle and you're going to be babysat by this like monk guy who's taken vows of celibacy and all that. And you're going to get close to the Prince Sebastian and spy on him because we think he might be working for like our kingdom's enemy or whatever. Or you can get married to the stake. Tough choice. She picks the glittering gowns. What a shock. I don't think it's a very fair love triangle. Here's Princey Pooh Bastion. Here's our one-eyed monk. He's not going to be able to satisfy you. He's taken a freaking vow of chastity forever. And yet that is the romance that is supposedly being explored more in this book. I did not feel their chemistry for one gosh darn second. Meanwhile, I'm like, yes, Prince, yes, Prince, yes, Prince. And at one point, he's even like, kind of a player. I don't know if I see you like maybe more as a friend. I feel it's got to be a friend. It's got to be a front run because he doesn't want to hurt her. Oh, the romance killed me. No, it did not kill me. The magic. It was the most incredible magic system. I have never read better descriptions of magic in my whole entire life. By the time I put this book down, I felt like I knew what it was like to stand in Laura's shoes and literally use death magic. Hannah Witten does this thing where she tells you what it's like for the world to switch over to black and white. You can practically feel your vision change. You can feel the world go cold around you. You know what it's like for Laura's hands to slowly lose their color. You know how exhausting it is and how hard and cold the world gets around you. You know what it looks like. There are all these threads. You know, she's playing with that imagery of the threads of life from Greek mythology. It was kind of complicated, but not too complicated. It definitely had repercussions. It took a real toll on people. It had a balance to it. 5 stars just for that alone. Amazing. So check out the Foxglove King. I loved all the things that I thought I was going to hate and was just like, about the things that I thought I was going to love. I still don't know who we're supposed to be rooting for in the love triangle. I also read The Threads That Bind by Kika Hatsopoulou. This is sort of based in a world where the magic is kind of pulled from Greek mythology. This is not at all how I pictured anything in this book, or any of the characters, by the way. Like, it doesn't even match the... No. So we have people who have, you know, dream magic based like from Morpheus, and then the sisters we're following have magic based on the Fates. They're called the Moira-born. So there are always 3 sisters born to families of this. One will have powers who can sort of create new threads, so new relationships, new interests, whatever. One who can shorten or lengthen them, so, you know, you want to learn to play the piano, get them to lengthen that bond, and you're going to be really good at the piano. You're going to love everything about it. You're going to love practicing, etc., etc. Or get them to shorten a bond with your ex, and they're not going to matter so much anymore. It's more useful than it sounds. You also have the 3rd daughter who can snippety bonds, and it's not just to like end lives. You know, it can also damage relationships, or, you know, it can make you lose interest in something. It's a more interesting power than I thought it was going to be, and not quite so final as I thought it was going to be in most ways. So we're following a 3rd daughter named Io, and she can see all these threads, and it makes life pretty interesting for the most part. And she lives in like this gritty part of town. Her family doesn't have a lot of money, and, you know, one night she witnesses a murder. What's very unusual about the person who commits this murder is they should be dead because their lifeline is snipped. To complicate matters further, there's another witness, and it happens to be this boy, Eddie, who shares a very special thread with her, the soulmate thread. And so they go on to investigate this, and as time goes on, you know, she has to decide, is she going to tell him? Is she going to, you know, let him keep his free will? Is she going to snip their thread and sever their bond because it's just too much to have that knowledge and know what could be? All while they're trying to figure out, why are these basically zombies running around killing people in the city? I read this in one afternoon. It's a short, quick read. It was very YA. And it didn't really do anything new. I thought the premise was really interesting, using all the Greek mythology to bring in this new kind of magic, and I loved this one thing they did with like dream hopping with the Morpheus magic. But honestly, we kind of have seen this like murder mystery exploration before. The romance wasn't particularly compelling. I think it honestly was just a bit young for me. I think I would have liked this a lot more if I was a younger reader, but there was just nothing that memorable. And I'm disappointed to say that. I really wanted to like this book so much, but this was just an read for me. Last fantasy I read, The Hurricane Wars by Thea Guanson, was one of my most anticipated reads of the year, and this is one of the most beautiful books that I own. It truly, truly is. So it is such a gosh darn shame that I hated this book. First, I'll tell you what it's about. Why not? So Taliesin was left on the steps of a Sardovian orphanage as a baby, and I'm pretty sure she just took Stelena Sardothian's name and just switched a few letters because nothing in this book is remotely original. All she's ever known are the Hurricane Wars, and she's trying to fight against the Night Emperors for freedom for her people, and it's really not going very well at all. In fact, almost immediately she comes up against Alaric from House of Osnat, master of the Shadow Forge. And just in case you're wondering, yes, Taliesin does have light magic in her veins, because of course she does. So the two of them go up against one another right away, and we also find out Alaric is like getting, you know, hurt by his daddy. It's very Draco Malfoy in some ways, but apparently those are not the vibes I'm supposed to be getting. I'll let you know which ones I was supposed to be getting and did not know I was supposed to be getting momentarily. And, you know, he basically falls in love with her immediately when he sees her burning brightly on the battlefield battlefield. He tries to kill her and he just can't find it in his heart to do so, and thus begins their romance. Eventually they end up having to work together because they have to stop something even worse than the hurricane wars, and that will end the entire world, possibly, probably, and that's the book. So when I first started reading it, I was really confused because it was talking about ships and all these like generals and war, and I was like, why does this read like sci-fi? This is fantasy. Oh, these are airships. Okay, that's how we're saying this is fantasy. Okay. And there were so many weapons and stuff, and I went and I was like, something is confusing me. And I read the dedication and I was like, you're the rats. What the hell are you talking? You have to be pet rats? But apparently, this started out as Star Wars fan fiction, and that's what it felt like the entire time. Derivative fan fiction. This was not a fun experience, and would I be as salty if this copy wasn't as beautiful and this was not one of my most anticipated reads of the year? Probably not, but why are we publishing fan fiction? Why did this make it to the end of the Goodreads Choice Awards? Why did I read this book? You know, it wasn't terrible. The Jasad Heir. This was amazing. Oh, Sarah Hashem is, I think was this her debut? No, I think this was. This was absolutely amazing. This is about a girl named Sylvia who is the lost heir to Jasad. They have multiple kingdoms in this area, country, whatever. That's not fully, completely explained. But we see her opening up the story, and we know she's in hiding, and fairly soon in the book she unfortunately gets stuck in a situation where she kind of reveals her magic. And you know what you're not supposed to have? Magic. That's just a Jasad thing, you know, like that's not good. And normally like she would kind of be not allowed to continue with her existence, but instead the Jasad Heir is like, hey, I've got a proposition for you. We have these trials coming up, and I want you to represent my kingdom in them. And you're going to be our little warrior, and you're going to do that to help me lure out all these rebels who still want to, like, bring back Jasad and help that kingdom regain power and status and all that stuff. And she's like, well, my choice is death or being your little warrior person, so sure, I'll be your champion. Why the heck not? And we do see the competition go on. So if you like that kind of thing, first of all, you're getting that. Second of all, you are getting enemies to lovers, and I mean enemies. They hate each other. They make each other bleed in the beginning. I mean, they are freaking vicious. But you believe that they can come together and come to trust one another based on their shared experiences, but also based on their difficult past, based on the things they've been through, and based on the things they go through together. The build of their relationship and what they forge together is believable. And then watching their chemistry, watching their forbidden romance, and then watching when they finally give in and collide in this clash of passion. I mean, you don't get like the full, like, this is slow burn. We don't get the full, they don't go all the way, okay? But man, the world building is also incredible. I don't think I've ever read a world exactly like this, and watching them travel from kingdom to kingdom to kingdom, because each competition takes place in a different kingdom within this world, the author makes absolutely certain you are completely anchored in that space with the description, and each one is very distinct. I loved the writing, I loved the magic, I loved the history, I loved the twists and the little reveals that we got along the way. It was just so good. I loved this one. I also read one of my favorite books of the entire year, Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I was saving this. I'm so glad I did. This is about Emily Wilde, who is trying to write the world's very first encyclopedia of fairies, and she pretty much has the whole gosh darn thing banged out, but she still has to write about the hidden ones, and they are up in Scandinavia in a super cold area, and it's pretty remote, and they are really hard to like get in contact with. They don't show themselves to people, but she is super freaking determined. She's done all her research. She knows how to lure them out, and she has rented a cabin, and she is determined. This is all she has to do before she gets her book published and finally like gains the respect she deserves in her academic world. So she's out there, she's managed to offend an entire village in a very short span of time, and in walks perfectly groomed, very handsome, blonde, tall Wendell Bambleby, flanked by two of his graduate students. Wendell instantly makes friends with the entire village. Everyone loves him. He's the super personable guy, whereas Emily is like antisocial and doesn't know how to, deal with people. And why, when she put all this research into how to deal with fairies, but not like the actual culture of the village she's going to be living in? Don't ask me. I don't know. Feels like common sense to me, but whatevs. Wendell finally bridges the gap, helps things get going. Meanwhile, she's completely pissed and was like, why are you here? Are you trying to take over my research? Go away. I hate you, you stupid academic rival. Academic rivals to lovers. And he's like, no, look, there's this huge conference. We can present something together. I have tons of academic clout. Do this with me and you're gonna get loads of respect, and we only have a few months to do it. Let's hurry up. And she's like, okay, fine. So they start working together and doing all this research, and she's made progress and things are going well, and this is obviously going to be their romance, and it was so much more than I could have ever expected. I had hopes for what might happen right from the get-go, and the author hints she might go there, and she did go there, and then she gave me so much more than I could have ever asked for. I loved it. This is your folklore kind of fairies, the creepy, they're gonna not be super nice and be great, the bargaining troublemakers and kind of vicious kind of fae. It was so good. It was everything I ever wanted. I loved everything about this book with my whole heart. The writing was great. The characters were great. The romance was great. The folklore was great. The plot was great. I can't name anything I didn't like about this book. When are we getting this sequel? It was so perfect. Oh, these two, by the way, are me and my husband, except I'm Wendell and he's Emily, just so you know. Yeah. Oh, I loved it. Okay. Then the next category I went exploring through was the YA category. One of the books for that was Alexandra Bracken's Silver in the Bone. This is an Arthurian legend retelling, and let me tell you, this ended up being such a disappointment for me. I read the author letter and she was talking about Enya, so I was expecting sweeping Celtic, wonderful, fog-enveloped greenery on the island of Avalon. And then I read it and I was like, oh, this is modern day, but they're at least not doing reincarnation stuff. We've got treasure hunters and artifact seekers, which is pretty cool. But as we got into it, and we learned about Tamsin and found out she was seeking this ring to break a curse that was on her brother, which did suck as far as curses go. And she has to link up with a kind of rival treasure seeker / sort of enemy, and they're gonna fall for each other because he's the guy around her age, and everyone wants to compete to find this ring as well. I was into it at first. I liked what was going on with the treasure hunting and everything. I kind of liked the banter between her and this other treasure hunter, although again, Draco Malfoy, Hermione vibes very much here. Don't tell me, I'm not gonna even go there. Once we got into the actual Arthurian legend stuff, I just hated everything that happened with the plot and all the choices that were made. This is not how I want to see Arthurian legend done. I want the super romantic La Belle Dame Sans Merci. I want everything grand and epic and sweeping, and I want the truly larger than life, noble Knights of the Round Table, all of their rules of chivalry and all of that stuff. And I want the beauty and all of those types of things. And we got a really dark, grim, not beautiful version of everything having to do with Arthur and Avalon and Camelot, and I was really bummed. This is not what I wanted. I'm sure there are people who did want it and did love it and did enjoy it. I still want to read more from her. This was purely please don't do this to Arthurian legend kind of thing. I also read Foxglove, which I was a little nervous to read. Alan Grace wrote Belladonna. That's the first book in this, and I was super nervous because everyone was like, this one's not as good, but you know what? Yes, it was. Belladonna is about a girl who continually is kind of haunted by death, figuratively and literally. Everywhere she goes, her family dies around her, but she cannot die herself. She literally can eat freaking belladonna berries and be absolutely fine. When she goes to stay with the last of her family, it seems like they're not doing so great and kind of on death's door as it stands, and there's a mystery to be solved, and that's the first book. The second book, I think what people didn't love is that suddenly it's dual POV, and I loved the second point of view. I enjoyed it. I feel like we had to go there. We needed new blood in the story. The second point of view worked well for me. You know, Signa, as much as I loved her and the gothic feel and everything that happened in the first book, She's not very much like me. I think the second character that we see from is a lot more like me. I didn't mind seeing the new character who was introduced at the end of the last book come and be a bigger part of this book. We knew it was coming, and I think everything that they did in this book leading up to the final book in this series, I think Wisteria is going to be fantastic. I see where it's going. I'm getting the feels. I see what you're doing, Adeline Grace, and I'm so psyched for it. I think if you DNF'd this book, give it a second chance. I don't think it's going to do what you're afraid it was going to do, and you're going to love the ending, and you're going to feel like, yes, 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 never mind, I take it back. This is going to do great things, and Wisteria is going to be wonderful. So even if you don't give it 5 stars, please, if you DNF'd it, try it again. I also read Divine Rivals. Everyone's telling me this was going to be a 5-star, but it's by Rebecca Ross, and this is about 2 rival journalists. They're working at the same newspaper during what is sort of like a World War II setting, except instead of having humans starting it, we've got 2 gods starting it. Well, 1 god and 1 goddess. The god is named Dacre, and the goddess is named Enva, and she's sort of like the goddess of music. And as far as I can tell, Dacre is just the god of being obnoxious. It starts out with our gal Iris writing letters to her brother Forest, who felt like the need to go fight for Enva. You apparently can hear her music and they hear her call. And she's also trying to earn a spot as a columnist up against this guy named Roman, who does not come from a poor family like she does with an alcoholic mother. He comes from a rigid, obnoxious family who has lots and lots of money. So she's writing these letters, and finally she decides she's just going to start sticking them in her wardrobe because she's not hearing back, so there's no point in continuing to mail them. And she's basically using it as a therapeutic journal. And suddenly she's getting random letters just popping back out from under her wardrobe. It turns out to be Roman, although she doesn't know that, but Roman figures out like pretty much straight away it's Iris. That's not a spoiler, like he just knows. Roman starts writing her back, and this is very much like a You've Got Mail, but with way freaking higher stakes. Oh my god, do the stakes get high and ramp up really, really quickly. Rebecca Ross's writing is just stunning. My gosh, I just knew this was going to be a 5-star, and watching them fall in love, watching their chemistry, watching their romance, and you know, watching it in this high stakes situation where, you know, people are dying and there's a war going on and things can change so suddenly, it really ramped everything up and made everything just feel so, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, the whole time. And you do see more fantasy elements than I was necessarily thinking you were going to as well. So that was kind of a welcome surprise. My problem with this book was that I did not like the 2 twists at the end. I didn't like them. I didn't want those 2 things to happen. I didn't want what happened to Iris to happen. I didn't want what happened with her brother to happen. I didn't want what happened with Roman to happen. I just didn't want those things to happen. I didn't want the story to take those directions. And while I'm sure Rebecca Ross is going to make it work and make it be beautiful and brilliant and wonderful, and I'm going to end up loving it and thinking the story is so much better for it right now, I'm not happy. And that's all I have to say about that. But absolutely 5 stars. Yes, of course, I loved it. You all knew I was going to. You're smarter than I am. Thank you. Next up is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. And I gave this book so much crap because I did not love this edition when I first got it, and now I think that the faded, worn look to it just is the perfect aesthetic. So this is about Effie, who always had a very special place in her heart for the Fairy King and his story, which in this book is called Engarad, written by Emrys Murden. She had wanted to go to college to study literature, but apparently that's like the highest thing you can study in this world, which I kind of love that, but they only let guys study it in this world, which don't love that. So she is studying architecture instead, and one day she sees an advertisement for a contest in which you can enter to redesign the house in which this author lived. He's been dead for about 60 years now, but she's like, oh my god, this is fate, this is it, this is the one perfect architecture project for me. And so she enters it and she wins, and she gets to go to his house on this crazy little like cliff off in this very deserted place where everyone really believes in folklore and fairy tales. They kind of believe in the fae, and she kind of believes in the fae, so it's kind of perfect for her. And when she's there, she realizes that another student from her college is there who does study literature, and at first she's like, oh, he's doing research on this author, and then she realizes, he doesn't believe that my favorite author wrote all of his own work. I hate you, you suck. So we've got like not quite academic rivals to lovers. It's almost like enemies to lovers vibes here. But eventually they end up working together because this is more than she bargained for. I didn't think this was going to be as full-on fantasy as it was, and maybe that was my misconception and my misunderstanding, but this is fully set in a full-on fantasy world. I was not expecting the incredible story that I got from this book. This was one of my most anticipated reads, but it was so much more than I thought it was going to be. This book tackles mental health, men not believing women, women's evolving place in society, women's evolving place in academia, who has the right to study what, and literature, cultural identity. I was amazed, but it's the mental health stuff that was so incredible, because the entire time you're like, is what Effie is seeing real? She's on medication because she supposedly has been having visions her whole life, seeing things that aren't there. She has panic attacks. And as someone who also has panic attacks, I totally get it. And you see those symptoms and you're like, yep, totally recognize it. But as the story goes on, you're like, is this symbolic? Is she that obsessed with the story? Is the Fairy King real? Is he taking over the bodies of these people? Like, what is going on for real? And the further you get in the story, the more you realize the symbolism isn't for her, it's for us. Oh, it sunk its roots so deeply into me. At the end of the book, I was so much more affected by the story than just a typical fantasy book. This wasn't something that I could just open and close and put it down and pick it up kind of thing. You put it down, but it haunts you. I think everyone's going to find something in this book where they're going to say, I see that part of Effie in me, and I understand that part of her experience. I think most people will find something to identify with her, and that is what Ava Reid did so brilliantly. She gave us an allegory, and I haven't read a good one in a really long time. And I think originally a lot of the folk tales that we read, and I think that Angharad, the story that was written in the book itself, was meant to be very much an allegory. And for her to give us one, and for me not to realize it was one until the very end, or a combination of many of them, it was impressive. And this ended up being one of the most powerful and one of my most favorite reads of the entire year. Very unexpectedly. So, if you have this and you've been letting it languish on your shelf like I have, maybe consider picking it up. The last book I read in this category leads me into a readathon that I did. BooksToAshes, and I will leave her channel and the video with the readathon linked below, did a dragon readathon. And while I wasn't a super great participant in the Discord because I'm great in person, but online I'm actually really kind of shy in chat rooms and stuff. And I'm especially terrible on Discord because I always feel like I'm like interrupting other people's conversations. I don't know. But she did a great dragon readathon, and all you had to do was read one book essentially to make your dragon, but I read a bunch because there were a bunch of other options, which I'll explain momentarily. I did dragon readathon, and if you would like to join, I am sure you read at least one dragon book, which is all you had to do to make your dragon. But even if you didn't, it is ongoing. We're going to be making characters and doing side quests and all kinds of things. And I think there's especially going to be some kind of battle, which is why I chose Dragon Who Can Heal, so I don't have to do anything with the fighting stuff because that is not my jam. But if this sounds like fun to you, I'm sure she would still let you join because she is just one of my favorite booktubers right now. She is super sweet and kind, and also really quite funny if you are looking for someone else who has some content I don't have. She does read like a lot of high fantasy and definitely more like manga and stuff that I don't necessarily pick up, so go check her out. But let's get into it. So there's one dragon book that I feel like is kind of a spoiler because it doesn't mention dragons anywhere in the description, so I can't talk about that one or what it did for my dragon, so I'm gonna be quiet about that one. But I will talk about all of the other ones. So the first thing you had to do was read any dragon book you want to create your dragon. To create my dragon, I read Sacrificed to the Dragons, which is the first in the Stonefire Dragons series by Jesse Donovan. This was an interesting decision because at this point in the month I had ruptured my eardrum and I wasn't reading it on Kindle. I was listening to it out loud and I couldn't listen to it with headphones or earbuds because I couldn't hear out of this ear. So I had to listen to it out loud. And I don't know if you've ever listened to a smutty book on audio. I don't think I've listened to many, but doing it out loud, dear God, I thought I was going to blush to absolute death. And it's not like this was just your typical smutty book. That would have been better. But this one, we had a guy narrating because they couldn't listen to female voices because at that point female pitches doubled over. They were like clash. It was awful. It was just awful. Okay, I could only listen to male voices at this time, and I had to find a male narrator. So he's doing his best to do a female voice. I don't usually listen to male audio narrators. And he was doing, you know, not a bad male voice. He has like a Scottish accent, which works for me. But then the guy had to do the dragon voice. And the decision he made to do the dragon voice was something along the lines of, yes, we will mate her. She is ours. Like, for some reason, he chose to just make his voice slightly deeper and then drag out every syllable. So it sounded like he was doing this sing-songy thing. Like, I was laughing in scenes where this guy was supposed to be, like, bleeding out, dying. It was, it was really bad. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Okay, what is this book about? It's about a girl, Melanie, who has a brother who's like dying and she needs dragon blood to save him. So she agrees to go be a dragon mate, and only 1 in 1,000 women are compatible and can like hold a dragon baby. So she's like, fine, I'm gonna go do it. And Tristan is meanwhile like, I don't actually want a mate, but I want a baby. So as soon as she's done, I'm just gonna like keep the baby and kick her out. He's a super duper guy. This is like 10 years old and it reads like it. So they meet. And by the way, only like half the women who give birth survive it. So this is a terrible deal, okay? Terrible deal. But they meet and like begrudgingly like fall for each other because of course they do. And that this is just their story. The dragon of course decides she's his mate because they're always mates. And that's the book. That's the book. I'm gonna warn you right now. The one thing I will say, like, it's just average. It's just average. Maybe don't do the audiobook. Like, it was not. I mean, I'm sticking my fingers in my ears. Like, just don't do it. If you have had a traumatic experience giving birth, like say you've, I don't know, almost died doing so, just pick another one. Because an entire chapter is about how Melanie almost dies giving birth, and it is vivid and descriptive, and I found it pretty triggering. Parts of it were very close to what happened to me, and I just didn't want to relive that. It got to me more than I thought it was going to. So I'm gonna say it was fine, and if you don't care about that, great. But if you do, just pick another sister romance. There was nothing particularly special about this. There was nothing particularly bad about this. But if that's something that's triggering to you, choose another one. Step 2, I had to read a romance, and I tried to keep it to dragon books, and I figured this one just about fit. So I read Fairytale Heir, The Royals of Embermere, the first book in it, by Lucia Ashton, but it does have dragons on it, and I was expecting way more dragons, and we start out with our main chick in like a dragon camp. She's like cleaning and cooking, even though she's very much not a dragon shifter. She's kind of jealous of the dragon shifters, and I can't really blame her. Like, if you're a human, like hanging out with a bunch of dragons, you probably also want to be a dragon. But anyway, suddenly these people show up, and they're pretty aggressive, and they're like, hey, you actually need to go to Embermere with us because it turns out you're the king's illegitimate daughter and the actual heir just croaked. So you need to come back with us, and you're being summoned. And she's like, no. So they're like, fine, we're gonna knock you out with magic and drag you back, and you're coming whether you want to or not. They end up like shooting her with an arrow. She fights so hard. They're not messing around. So they get her back, and the queen's super pissed. The queen absolutely hates her and is like, we're not gonna make this easy. I'm not just gonna make you my heir. You're gonna have to fight for it. You're gonna have to fight in this big like battle against all of the fae. They're fae, and you don't really have magic. You're like half fae or whatever. So good effing luck. Like, we also don't train women to fight. So you're gonna be the only women fighting. So no one's gonna take you seriously. Have fun. And she's like, wow, I hate you, queen. The queen's also like, we're also not gonna tell anyone who you are because you make it like special treatment. We're just gonna tell them you're like some random royal from a land where no one ever comes from because it's so far away and is so unimportant. She's like, wow, this really sucks. And the queen's like, wait, it gets better. So as that random royal, you're going to be entering the female part of the competition and like wooing the men. She's like, what? She's like, yeah, no, hang on. You'll be entering the male part of the competition in disguise as a commoner under another name, like under one of our glamours. And she's like, excuse me? The queen's like, yeah, you're going to be 2 people at once while you're here. And you know what? I'll let my favorite royal guard named Rush Vega. Isn't that a great name? So Rush Vega is going to like spy on her and train her while she's in the commoner body, getting dissed by everyone at court because everyone cares so much about, you know, status. And she's going to be fighting against all the men in that body. What happens if she wins, like, the first fight, by the way? Is she going to be courting herself as the female? No one explained that part. I can't wait to find out because this leaves off on a super cliffhanger at the end of the first trial. And she has to fight against Rush Vega at some point, by the way, who's training her. That's going to go well. So she is hanging out in Embermere, meeting everyone, doing this training, and by far the best part of this book is her little goblin assistant, who the entire time is going, hurry, 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 we must go, off with her head. I listened to the audiobook before I damaged my ear, and I realized as it was going that this is very much like an Alice in Wonderland retelling. And the more I think about it, the more I'm realizing, like, Queen of Hearts, we've got, like, some rabbit action with her, like, hurrying and the off with her head stuff. I can't wait to see how it's going to play out more. They're very much against the dragon shifters, so I think that's going to be, like, the Jabberwocky thing. They've got, like, dragon heads mounted around, and they're not saying why. And I actually do want to continue with this series. I had a lot of fun with this book. I think I explained it kind of badly, but it is an extremely convoluted, complicated plot. This girl is literally supposed to be 2 different people at the same time. She's literally supposed to be in 2 places at once a lot of the time. And it's just fun. Watching all that complication and the messiness, I think, is the fun of the book. And the queen is always like, off with her head, off with his head. Like, she is this vicious, horrible fae. And it makes so much sense to make the Queen of Hearts a fae, because that's what fae are like. They don't care. They're vicious. They're violent. They're horrible. They're always like that. It makes so much sense. It's brilliant. So I can't wait to continue on. My dragon gets to be a healing light dragon, which totally works for me, because now I hopefully don't ever have to, like, fight anyone or do anything or be a bad guy, or however this is gonna shake out. Apparently there's gonna be, like, good guys, bad guys fighting. I don't know. I was kind of like, Ash, can I just be a damsel in distress or a princess or something? And she was like, that'd be fun, but that's not really how it's gonna work. So here's my out, I guess. All right, next category. I skipped over because we could give our dragon scars, but, like, no. Skipping that one. Next, we got to, here's my favorite one. Okay, we got to pick the color for our dragon. Of course, it's my favorite one. Like, who am I kidding? So we got to pick the color for our dragon, and I chose the Dragon's Promise. Here's my color scheme for my pretty dragon. And this is the second book in the duology for 6 Crimson Cranes. Elizabeth Lim is a delightful writer. In the first book, we meet Princess Shiori, and on the day she's supposed to marry this guy named Takan, she, like, kind of screws up and winds up in the pond in the garden on the morning of her wedding. And her stepmother, Raikama, finds her and is like, hey, yo, you screwed up. I'm also a sorceress. I'm gonna, like, banish you and stick, like, this wooden bowl in your head so no one can recognize you, and you're not gonna be able to tell anyone, because if you speak any words, here's what's gonna happen. I'm turning your 6 brothers into 6 Crimson Cranes, and for every word you speak, one of them is going to die. Yeah, problems. So she, like, runs away to this cold world, ends up literally in the guy's village who she's supposed to marry, which is kind of hilarious, and he kind of turns out to be really amazing. Of course he does. And she's trying to, like, figure out how to break the curse. She meets a dragon prince along the way who's kind of cool. She accidentally mistakes him for, like, an eel at first, which is pretty hilarious. Men care about size always. Guess the water was kind of cold. Shrinkage. Ouch. He hadn't reached his full size yet. It's fine. It's fine. He had growing to do. Sorry, Dragon Prince. But this was magical and wonderful and 5 stars, and I originally didn't have the special editions. I hadn't signed up or discovered Fairy Loot yet. This is all, like, very new to me. I was determined that I was going to buy the special editions, so I waited a gosh darn long time before I picked up the sequel, which was such a shame because I feel like I kind of forgot a lot of the magic and the characters, and I really lost a lot. and it took me a bit to get back into it. I cannot tell you what happens in the second book because it's a sequel. I'm not going to ruin it. I will tell you the writing is just as good. Her writing just has this cadence, this comforting cup of tea, fairy tale. I feel like I'm comforted by it. I love it so much. It just reminds me of my childhood for some reason. I love Elizabeth Lim's writing. I can't wait to read more from her. Every word is right, every word is purposely chosen, but it feels effortless. It's like sinking into a warm bath. It's comforting, and it feels like she's writing her very own fairy tales, and I love it so, so much. I will say I didn't love this one quite as much. That was 5 stars, this is 4 stars. The beginning of this book just felt very disconnected from the end of this book, minus like one little kind of tie-in. Although the beginning I did kind of love because they did sort of a little bit of like a reverse Little Mermaid thing, not with the voice thing. Like in the beginning of the book, you would think that was what it was talking about. It's not. Totally different thing. But it was beautiful. And I'm so glad that my dragons get to be this color, so yay. After that, we had to choose our dragon size, and this was Song of Silver Flame Like Night. This is by Amelie Wenzel. This was wonderful. This almost got 5 stars. I'll explain why I didn't in a second, but this is about Lan, and Lan has always had this mark like on her arm that her mom gave her right when she died, which was super duper tragic because it happened right in front of her. But she has grown up in this city working in a tea room, and it's a little sketch because like she's kind of a song girl there, but like the customers don't like have to respect her. And one day she's about to get super disrespected, if you take my meaning, when this guy named Zen like kind of saves her and drags her away when he realizes she kind of has magic and he totally has magic too. And he sees her arm and he's like, wow, this symbol looks really important and kind of like other magical symbols, but it's not totally recognizable, so let's go back to my school and like journey through the mountains and find out what the heck is up with it. And she's like, better than my alternatives, let's go, Zen. So Lan and Zen is a magician, and he takes her like off to the last magic school in the land, and they're gonna go, and like her world is right now at war and slowly being taken over by these conquerors who are really not nice people, like really not nice people. That's who like got her mom and everything. So she absolutely wants to like take a stand against them and figure out what the mark is for, and this is her journey and her like trying to learn magic. And I loved this book so much. They absolutely both have their own like little secrets and things like literally hidden inside them, like magical things. And I know you learn everything exactly when you're supposed to, but it just drove me crazy feeling so lost in the beginning, and I was frustrated to some extent, and that's why I gave it 4 stars instead of 5. But by the end, my goodness, the two of them are just so pure and delightful and wonderful, and I just loved watching them. I love books with schools in them and learning about magic and everything. That's always going to get me every single time. The stakes were so high. There was a bit of mystery to it because we had no idea what this mark was or what it meant. I mean, we got to see spirits and ghosts and all kinds of magic. This was a wonderful, wonderful book, and it's just the most beautiful edition. So I loved this so much. And because of the length of my book, my dragon is my size, about 6 feet. Okay, I'm not 6 feet. All right, my dragon's a little bigger than me. I can just ride my dragon. I promise not to eat too many Christmas cookies, dragon. I skipped the next step, which was injuries, because I'm not injuring my dragon. We're never going to ever see battle ever, so it doesn't matter. We're going to stay behind the scenes and fight. Step 7 was personality, and I was saving this. I knew this was going to be a 5-star. All of the Tea Dragon Tapestry books are 5 stars for me. And I was right, especially because this one takes place during fall. So of course it was going to be a 5-star. If you have not read any of the Tea Dragon Society graphic novels, the first in the series was the first graphic novel that I ever picked up in my whole entire life. So thank you, Kay O'Neill. I didn't know if I was going to like graphic novels. I was kind of like, is that too nerdy for me? Turns out, no, it's not too nerdy for me. I absolutely fell in love. The illustrations are absolutely beautiful. Yes, they remind you of being a kid, but these books, graphic novels, I guess, sorry, do so much more. They are about belonging, found family. They just make you feel comforted, but they get deep in the feels too. Don't think you're just sitting down and looking at some cute pictures of dragons. The tea dragons are these adorable, wonderful, slightly cantankerous, very picky little dragons that you need to raise and take care of. And eventually, if you do take good care of them when you brush them, or, you know, some of them, like when you like groom their horns, or however it works for your particular breed of dragon, when you take care of them, you will get like little tea leaves off of them, and that's how you get tea in this world. And I just think they're the sweetest, most darling, most wonderful things in the whole world. Like here you can see this one has tea that'll like come off his horns. I think that's the green tea dragon. They're just the sweetest, cutest little things ever, and I love them so much. Like here's chamomile. They just come like right out of his head. Oh, I would die for a tea dragon. I'm like a massive tea drinker. I have at least a cup every single night. Like it's how I relax and calm down after a long day. Like that's my thing. I can't say too much because this is the third in the series. I'm trying not to ruin anything, but we do have all kinds of LGBTQIA+ representation. We have a gentleman who has retired from being a great warrior and traveler. He now is living in the village and has found his true love, but he is in a wheelchair. We have a half dragon who's hanging out doing awesome stuff. Everything you could want, you know, young, old, non-human. We have just everything you could possibly want. Look how cute. Look how absolutely adorable Ginseng is in his little scarf. I love everything about these books, and I hope you'll give them a try, even if you've never tried a graphic novel. Absolute 5 stars, which means my dragon, according to Ash, is the best of the best. It's everything you'd want a dragon to be. Brave, loyal, friendly, delightful, wonderful, secret snuggler. You name it, I have the perfect dragon for me, and I'm very happy about it. The book that I can't talk about was an even number of pages. So my dragon is a she, my dragon's a female. I feel like women are just natural healers, so I felt like that suited us both. Thank you so much for joining me. Go check out Books to Ashes Dragon Readathon. I had the best time with all of my dragons and creating my dragon. I can't draw for crap, or I would have attempted to create something for you. But that's it for me. Thank you so much for joining me for my November wrap-up. I will let you get back to your book, and I will be getting back to mine. I am currently reading a holiday read. I'll give you a little preview if you're still here. I'm reading A Winter in New York by Josie Silver, and it's fantastic. I love it so much. I will see you next time. Bye, guys.